Welcome everybody to LR Backstage. This is Juice with Josh Savage here, the one and only. I'm so excited to be able to interview Josh here. I've been acquainted with Josh for almost 9 months now is when maybe came across the listening room. So I just wanted to give Josh an opportunity to share his story. I want to introduce him to you guys. Without further ado, please, Josh, if you don't mind introducing yourself, tell us where you're from and tell us how you came in contact, how we met.
Yeah, hey Juice, thanks for having me. What an honor, and crazy to think that was 9 months ago now. That's crazy. Time flies.
Right.
Yeah. So, wow, I feel like my life was completely different back then too. So my name is Josh Savage. I'm a British indie singer-songwriter based in Berlin, and I make catchy, melancholy kind of music, and a bit like the sound of Coldplay, Snow Patrol, Ryx, Ben Howard, kind of a concoction of those. And I'm independent. I'm unsigned. I'm self-managed, and I basically got started by just booking my own shows and touring around the world. I've now played up to 700 shows on 4 continents, and it's all basically been off my own back, and of course had to re-strategize when the pandemic hit, and that's how I got into music NFTs. And I'm sure that's something we're going to delve into a bit more later. And up to today, I've now, as well as all those shows, I've now played a lot more reputable shows, from selling out my own venues in Berlin and London, but also recently I supported Snow Patrol and Robbie Williams and Bright Eyes, and the Robbie Williams one was to 100,000 people, which was such a dream come true, and that was just 1 month ago as well. So like I said, I feel like my world's completely different now compared to 9 months ago.
Wow. Yeah, there's so much to get into and unpack there. But let's start out with, let's work backwards a little bit then. Let's talk about your show opening up for Robbie Williams in front of 100,000 people. Wow. How did you, let me start here. Were you nervous?
Oh my God. When I was on stage, I was fine. It's the wait before that kills me, because you want to focus on the show, but you don't want to freak out too much about it too. And then you kind of want to distract yourself so you don't freak out too much. And it's like this weird limbo. And just the scale of this show was just beyond anything I've ever experienced before. And before that, I just got off tour with Snow Patrol and Bright Eyes, which was a few thousand people, but this was just 50 times bigger. It was absolutely massive. And I still remember the walk from the green room to the main stage was like half an hour, and that's just how big this was. And it's just very very difficult to fathom, and try to stay focused and not get too overwhelmed, so I could still put on a great show.
Was it it was a festival, correct?
No, it wasn't.
No,
it's literally Robbie Williams. He was like the headline act, and there were only 2 supports, but the other one was a DJ basically. So I was the only other live act. So it was really special because so I actually had a very attentive crowd who came to see me play. So that was awesome.
So you had spoken to booking your own shows and over 700 shows thus far. Do you mind sharing a little bit of your experience from being an independent artist, managing your own bookings, to now having a booking agent, what that experience has been like for you over time? I'm an actor, model, writer myself. I've shared with you, I lived in LA for almost 4 years. So I still am represented till this day, still have management and representation, but only on the visual arts side of things, not on the music side of my career. So if you don't mind maybe sharing what your experience has been like as an independent artist, booking your own shows, growing through that process, obtaining a booking agent, and then now to where you are now, and if you can maybe just shed a little bit of light of that process for you over these past couple of years and Yeah, that'd
Sure.
be great.
I think if you have people who want to work with you, you should definitely consider it, and it's definitely something I do. However, I think especially if you're starting out, you shouldn't have to wait for someone to give you the green light. You should just get started ASAP, and that's definitely something I did. I got started by just playing living room shows. I actually discovered So Far Sounds very early on, and really used their platform to tour around the world. And most of the time, it's just like performing to 20, 30 people in someone's home. But I actually found that was more powerful than playing to hundreds of people in a packed room full of drunk people who were talking over the performance. And I was actually selling more merchandise in these living rooms and gaining more loyal followers than some of these big places where you don't actually have people there for the music, you know. So and
What
of course,
platform is this again?
So Far Sounds.
So Far Sounds. Okay.
So yeah, they're awesome. They've been going for a decade, and they're a great platform to use when you're starting out, because they're organising secret shows, and now they've grown to be all around the world. I've actually played one in Chicago at a brandy distillery, I believe it was. It was awesome, and that was actually quite a big one because of the size of the venue. So it was about 100 people, and you have an attentive crowd. And now I've played up to 100 So Far Sound shows in quite a few countries, and they're actually making a documentary about me now because of my baby steps from playing living room shows to now opening to Robbie Williams to 100,000 people. And
Wow.
I know he's not that well known in the US, but he's absolutely massive on this side of the world, and he's like one of the absolute pop icons of our popular music. And sorry, what was the question again?
Well, yeah, just going from maybe not from really booking your own shows through a platform like So Far Sounds to acquiring a booking agent, you know, and maybe, right, like that's maybe something, even that's why I wanted to kind of share that experience. You know, I've had my agents and managers, you know, over the course of my career as well. And it's from the outside in, it's kind of like almost an anomaly from the outside in, really not understanding how to really get into that position to finally where, you know, not just getting interest, but getting signed by someone who really believes in you, and not just believes in you, but really goes out and works for you and really gets your placements and everything like that. Maybe if you can just touch a little bit on that experience, or, you know, from going from So Far Sounds to really getting your booking agent.
100%. And I think the key really is you need to believe in yourself, and you need to get started, and you need to only then will other people start believing in you and then start giving their time to work with you. And now I'm now working with a German agent called Temptation Music, and she works really hard, which is incredible, and she really believes in me. And but I wouldn't have got to meet her if I wasn't working so hard and building my own hype and that before. And I think that's the key, really. You need to work hard yourself, do the jobs that you don't want to do, like booking and admin and all that shit, and build your own leverage, so that if you have a label that come up to you and say, I want to sign you, you can say, well, what can you actually bring to me? How can you help me? Because otherwise, I mean, that at the end of the day, you are the boss, and you are hiring all these people, and you might even work so hard and become so successful, you might not even need these people anymore. And it's funny because the way we started into the music industry, you had to get signed and all of these things.
Yeah.
And now what's awesome is that you do not have to rely on these gatekeepers anymore. And it's not to say that you shouldn't work with these gatekeepers. Some can be absolutely incredible, but you do need to be savvy and make sure you have the right deal for you, and a team that believe in you and will work as hard as you. And I think that's something I find quite difficult. Is I find it really hard to find people who will work as hard as I am working for myself.
Yeah.
But you do have to
Wow.
delegate and grow your team, because at the end of the day, if you become more successful, like, you just run out of time, and at the end of the day, you need to, the music is still the focus, and that should be where you're working on predominantly.
Yeah, totally, man. You brought up so many great points there, but that hard work by yourself, and let's take it to the pandemic, right? Let's talk about your career pre-pandemic to where you are now, right? Because we've got to kind of grow together as well in the space, met on Twitter Spaces. And I remember, it might have been, I'm kind of getting goosebumps just thinking about it, but I remember back in like January or February, around there, was when we had started up the Listening Room, which for anyone that doesn't know is a global collaboration hub that helps facilitate the creation, collaboration, and distribution of music between artists. We have our own platform, radio show, where we have the ability to provide exposure to artists as well. So Josh was one of the few artists many artists that have come through the Listening Room, but one of the original OGs. I got to give you that.
Did you start it in January?
Officially, I do believe. Yeah, the Listening Room is officially January. That was.
Oh, wow! See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought, because
So
you seem so professional and so slick, that I felt like you guys have been doing this for months at least. So wow. We were honestly, we had been, like, Andrew Disguise and I, we had been growing our relationship, and Irie as well, it's been a year for me. I got into the Twitter Spaces about August, September of last year. So it's like I'm kind of hitting a whole year now and being like, wow, this has been a crazy year, So happy anniversary, man.
Took me about, thank you. It took me about 2 to 3 months of kind of getting my footing in the space. And then even feeling comfortable of putting myself out there as a musician. See, no one even knew that I was like a music producer. I never even used my Twitter. I had 55 followers on my Twitter time last year,
What are you on now?
Yeah. And like 2,400, I think.
Great work. Yeah.
Yeah. Just it's good enough.
That's fantastic.
But I want to take a moment in this interview and speak to that phenomenon that we've experienced simultaneously, and that is I'd like to maybe term it in the moment Web3 verse. The bridge to Web3, what people may know it as Web3, but I just liken it as people utilizing Twitter Spaces and leveraging blockchain technology, so to speak, and merging that together. I'm going to call it the Web3 verse for the sake of this interview. So, Josh, I remember when you first got into the Listening Room, and let me just kind of give everyone the lowdown. Josh has been, I've almost never seen anyone work as hard as Josh. He's just spoken to it himself. And so all day, all night, day in and day out, day after day, being able to perform live in the Twitter Spaces in front of audiences. You would leave one space, go to the next space. This space might have 20 people in it. This space might have 10 people in it. This space might have 100 people in it. You might go through 6, 7, 8, 9 spaces a day playing live, playing the same song over and over, but what that is, but even still, you graced, I felt like you really graced our space and every single space that you came in with your amazing voice, with your talent. And can you speak to what your experience was like as an artist before getting onto Twitter Spaces? I remember you speaking you were almost at the verge of quitting your career in a sense. Can you maybe speak to what that was like and the revival in a sense of your own career and leveraging blockchain, Twitter Spaces, and even hopping into the Listening Room?
Yeah, of course. So I depended so much on live music, and that was my main income. So, and before the pandemic hit, I had such good momentum happening, especially here in Germany, which has been my target market most recently. And I just got off tour with Codeline. I was about to drop my debut album, and of course it dropped March 2020, of all months, when the pandemic started. So that was a huge anti-climax. And I think the most frustrating is how we never really knew when the pandemic was going to end, and when these tours kept getting rebooked, they ended up getting postponed once again, and then it just got so depressing. And despite that, I just kept my head down. I kept writing. I kept releasing songs every 6 weeks on Web2, on Spotify and all the streaming platforms. And I just kept working. However, on the inside, I was just like dying because, well, I enjoy performing so much anyway, but of course that was my main income. So I had to think outside the box a bit more. I started teaching, which I do enjoy, but isn't what I'm most passionate about. And I was like pitching my songs to music industry, and they just weren't giving it much attention at all. And it just came so, but I kept going for about 2 years. But I remember at the end of last year, I just was basically burnt out. I kept writing weekly. I wrote consistently for 4 weeks straight, and wrote 50 songs in that time during the pandemic. And and I'm glad I did, because especially with how crazy this year's been, I've not been able to be creative, but I have such a back catalogue of work that's still unreleased, which I can depend on now. But yeah, I vividly remember I was sick of music actually for a time at last year, and that's why I needed a bit of a break from it. So I kept releasing songs, but I was more, I got sidelined and started learning about crypto. I joined on the Dogecoin trend. I bought at the top and sold at the bottom, the standard entry. Well, at least that was the case for me. And I vowed never to jump into anything blindly again.
Right.
So it was quite nice, actually. I learned how to read charts, and that kind of got me to learn about the Web3 world, and eventually jump into NFTs. I vividly remember joining your room on your Twitter space in January. I was literally a Web3 baby. I didn't really even know what NFT was. I saw you guys were very familiar with Cardano, which is a project I've been wanting to learn more about. But most of all, what I loved about your space is that I felt heard, and thanks to your space and many others like it, I felt I was actually sick of my music by that stage, but I was just giving it one last shot, because I was about to do like a coding course, so I could do like a proper job basically, and something a bit more sustainable, at least, especially during the pandemic. And thanks to you guys and all the amazing people who host Twitter spaces, I ended up falling back in love with my music again. And I remember the song I played in your space. It was Golden Days. I think it was about 2 a.m. my time or something as well. And you, I don't think I was booked to perform it, but you squeezed me in, especially considering the time zone for me, which was very kind of you guys. And just the reception was just fantastic. And just from that day, I'm completely in love with you guys and with what you do. And thanks so much for the love you bring to musicians here and make us feel heard and supported is absolutely awesome.
Yeah, bro. I remember pretty vividly myself, because I remember at the time, I don't think, besides one other artist by the name of Musicavi. I don't know if you remember Musicavi. He was the only one that we had really had in there performing, and it wasn't even in the listening room. It was more so on like the Cardano Soners Club or something like that. And he's cross-chain ETH, Tezos, Cardano. But up until him, I hadn't really heard anyone perform live, and not just perform live, but perform live in the manner and how you did. And so I have a question for you. My head went in a few different ways with you sharing, but first question: what's your favorite part of your process? Writing, recording, or performing?
That's a fantastic question. I think one of the things I love about being creative is how if you get bored of one, you can jump to the other, and every day is different. And I adore writing, especially when you've finished a song that you love. There's no better feeling. You feel like you're on top of the world. Almost the same kind of feeling as when you've played to 100,000 people. But of course, that's a completely different experience altogether as well. And recording, same thing. Like it's awesome when you finish a song and you're really proud of it. I think the issue with recording is you have to listen to your song so many times to perfect it, and then you still have to sit on it for a few months before you release it. So by the time you release it, you're kind of over the hype of your own song, and then you have to try and translate that to your fans and to your performances. But I mean, when you perform, it's always a different experience every time, and that's what's awesome. So I can't really pick a favorite. It's like picking your own child, your favorite child, and but that's what I love about being independent musician, is that I can jump between all three whenever I like, and I love so the traveling aspect of that as well, and meeting and connecting with people. And what's awesome about Twitter Spaces is that I feel like I'm doing that, but from my PJs, without having to move anywhere, without carrying a fuck ton of gear. So that's really amazing. And I think what's really exciting about Twitter Spaces is that for me, they feel like living room shows. You have an attentive crowd, and you can bounce from one to the other in a flash without having to pay for flights. And of course, you don't see the world that way, but it's like an amazing way to connect with people and also to build a loyal following as well, which for me is the most important thing. I'm not fussed about being the most famous artist out there, but it's about doing what you love and connecting with people. And I can't remember who came up with the theory that all you need is 1,000 true fans. And thanks to Web3 and what the technology from Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces, you can kind of build that gradually if you put the time in. And everyone's hyped about TikTok right now, right? But TikTok's a lot more hit and miss. It's stats on a screen, and you could go viral. But what I found as well is that your content that goes viral doesn't necessarily get you new listeners. And what I love about NFTs and Twitter Spaces is that it's human, right? And you're connecting with people in real time, and I feel like that's worth more than 1,000 likes on TikTok, TikTok post,
Right. You made a great point. I want to hit on a couple different ones, right, really quickly. Then we can start to wind it down a little bit. But I want to make that connection from your back catalog of writing, of how much you've had written, to your current NFT collection that you have out now, Love Letters, that you're 58% minute out. Was there music a part of this collection that you've had kind of stashed in the back? And or I've noticed that, I said it on the space. I was like, Josh, you're such a lover boy. And I really enjoy the content and the quality of your music, and also the vulnerability, the place that you write from, and actually be able to connect that in your performance as well when you finally actually get it out instead of it just being on paper. So can you speak to maybe if there's any music that you had from the past, and then music that you kind of had to write to make that the project that it is in the modern day? Or what was that? What's this project about? What's Love Letters about? And can you speak to it being the NFT project that it is now, and How long did it take you to put it together? And what are future plans for the project?
Sure. So yeah, I'm definitely a bit of a hopeless romantic. However, when I started writing songs, I vowed never to have the word love in my songs. I wanted to be more creative, because I was listening to all these songs on the radio. They were just saying love, 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 and it was overused. And I was still young. I didn't fully understand love either. So I thought that's way too cheesy. I'm going to be cooler than that. And so my first album, the debut album that released in March 2020, The Long Way Round, was an album about self-discovery. And then when I started writing my second album, I fell in love with this girl in New York and started writing letters to each other. And then we ended up meeting each other all around the world. We first met in Paris, then Cuba, and naturally, as a singer songwriter, and I write very personal songs and vulnerable songs. That's just where the songs were going, and I find you just got to go with the flow, and you can't really prevent it. And otherwise, even if it sounds cheesy at the time, it's like that's how you get creative block. And it's like I feel like when we're songwriting, at the end of the day, we're channeling our subconscious, right? And it's when we are too scared of the things we want to say that we really do have creative block. And you should just open yourself to it. And when you're songwriting, don't be afraid of the process. If you don't like the song at the end of the day, just don't release it. You don't have to share it with anyone. And for me as well, songwriting is very, very therapeutic. And so I wrote this album called is on Web3. It's Love Letters, and it's based on this true story. And we were actually me and now my girlfriend, we were permanently separated during the pandemic because she's based in New York and I'm in Berlin, and we didn't know when we were going to see each other again. We were permanently separated for 6 months, and actually ended up having to I found a loophole in the system where Americans were allowed to fly to the UK, and but not directly to Germany in the first summer of 2020, the first summer of the pandemic. So we ended up having to quarantine her at my parents' place in the UK. They went off to have a nice holiday somewhere, so I could smuggle into Germany. And after the 2 weeks quarantine, she could finally be allowed to fly to Germany, and then moved in with me here. And I really wanted to. I released that album on Spotify called Another Life, and that's the name on Spotify. But I really wanted to kind of what I find so frustrating about releasing on Spotify these days, right? It's like TikTok is very hit and miss, and I feel like it's passive listening. People aren't really paying attention or valuing the music anymore, not even financially, but really giving it attention. I feel like people, when they listen to music on Spotify, generally it's playlist dominated, right? That's how you go big on Spotify. And a lot of these playlists, you're not even properly listening to it anymore. And what it used to be like is that people would save up a lot of money to buy a vinyl, and then you know how a vinyl works, right? You have to really give it the proper attention. You have to get the needle in the right place. You're going to make sure it doesn't get scratched, and it's treated as this like proper art form, right? And then if you go to half the album and then you have to swap it, and if you're not paying attention, then you're not listening to the full album. And people literally listen to it word for word, and I think that's something we're missing a lot in music right now, and the value is not there, not just financially. I mean, it's just awful that every Spotify player is 0.0003 cents or something like that. So I think the attention's not there anymore. And what I thought was so really cool about learning about Web3 and NFTs is that this is going to bring the album back. It's not where you have to throw a single out every 6 weeks and hope it gets on the playlist. You can give it the proper attention. And what I found is my fans and my collectors are doing the same thing. So I wanted to really transmit that with the input, with the visual and everything. So what I did is I called it love letters, so it's a lot more easier to understand the concept of this album. And also I handmade each letter featuring 2 to 4 lines of the lyric of the song, because also something I find as well is people don't automatically listen to the lyrics, and if they mint an NFT and have those lyrics, then I feel like the fan can either discover a lyric for the first time, or they can, like, if there's a lyric that they love, that they are really inspired by, then they can bring that close to heart by minting that letter that has those lyrics on it. And of course, I made the letters in all shapes and sizes. Some are gold, some are on really nice vintage paper, some are blue, all of this sorts of things. And also added some raindrops for some of the songs, because I've got a song called Don't Mind the Rain. And I collaborated with illustrators to create some visual art inspired by the song, which is awesome. So actually there's 8 songs in the collection in total, and the one of ones are basically really beautiful illustrations inspired by each song, which I think is awesome. The fact that I can do that now with this technology is fantastic. And now I'm having my fans who aren't just like listen to it for like 30 minutes on Spotify and then probably forget about it. They're like proper invested in the album in a whole new way, which I think is awesome. And I really want to bring back to my fans as well. So if you hold certain pieces, then you unlock certain utilities and rewards, such as if you just hold one, then you have token gated content and have access to gigs. If you hold 2, and this is a great one for fellow musicians who want to fuck with my music as well, they get the vocal stems to all the songs in the collection, and then have the freedom to release that on Web 2 and Web 3 as well, and so much more, such as having signed physical prints of the lyrics if you collect all the lyrics of a song. And for the top utilities, you can get VIP tickets with a +1 to my shows for live, my headline shows, albeit because I'm planning to incorporate that to support shows that I do too, but sometimes I don't have that power and I don't want to overpromise. But the big one is for my fans who believe in me and want to invest in my work and collect every single one of my songs in the collection and hold one of the one of ones, then I'll write a custom song for that fan, and it could be anything they wish. And I think that's just so cool that I can do that now with my fans, and it's almost like a Kickstarter campaign, a crowdfunding campaign, but on steroids. Because now with that investment in that I'm making from NFTs, I can have the funds to invest in my next album without having to pander to any music industry. And it's funny, Juice, I was actually at a London music industry event just a few days ago, just before I came back to Berlin. And there was a MMF conference, which stands for Music Managers Forum. And so tons of managers there, some really high up in the industry in the UK, and some just starting out. But word on the street, man, was NFTs. All they wanted to do was talk about NFTs, wonder what the fuck is an NFT, how to get started, how does that apply to music. And I was there recently after supporting Snow Patrol and Robbie Williams, and doing really well selling NFTs. And man, we're so early and ahead of the curve. It's just unreal. And I even had someone that night offer me a record deal on the spot. And I'm like, I'm not against it, but like, they're going to really have to like bring a lot to the table, right? If for me to sign a deal, because why would I? I'm getting the investment for my NFTs. I can do what the fuck I like rather than having to pander to anyone else's tastes. And I know my fans are gonna trust me and believe in me that they're gonna love it anyway. And I can hire my own marketing team from the investment in my NFTs. And it's like, well, yeah, why would I sign a label? And like I said, I'm not against it, but they're going to have to bring a lot to the table, and
Yeah,
their percentage is going to have to be a lot friendlier than it has been in the past, right? Because the major the major split usually is 80 to 20 in their favor, right? And then out of the 20, you're expected to then pay your manager, your lawyer, pay
exactly.
taxes, and then from that, whatever amount is left, you're expected to use that advance to invest in the project. And it's like there's nothing fucking left. And then how do you even pay rent anymore? You know, so actually being on a major label, you might be more famous, but like you're probably more broke than someone like me right now who isn't as famous but
Right,
holds all my rights.
right.
You know, so anyway, that's a massive rant, but it's so exciting right now as an
No,
independent artist in NFTs.
yeah, right. And you know what I've termed it? You made a great point earlier. We can start to wind down within these next 10 minutes too, but you made a great point earlier about the 1,000 fans, and I'm creating these course modules right now. And one of the aspects that I talk about in the marketing module is I call it the direct to consumer X factor. And I highlight the artist Nipsey Hussle back in 2013 when he released his debut album called Crenshaw. He released 1,000 copies at $100 each, sold out in 24 hours. So he acquired 100,000 in 24 hours, and then released the digital version across all platforms the very next day. He sold out from within his own shop, behind his own record label. So it was totally an independent project, and he labeled the experience, so to speak, proud to pay. And so this was already back in 2013, almost 10 years
Oh
ago,
wow!
when Nipsey Hussle deployed this whole strategy. And man, you're so right. Even when it comes to, I personally have we have our mixtape out right now is the LR Mixtape Volume 1, but I had my own personal collection as JUSE that I sold out as well back in March. And
Congrats,
at
man.
that moment in time, thank you. That had officially become the most money I'd ever made off of my music, and I was sitting here like my world was changed. I'm sitting here going to the store, I'm buying food, I'm getting gas, I'm throwing money on my rent, and I'm just
You
like,
have a kid
wow,
as well.
I'll probably never. Right, my daughter, making sure, and that's what it was. I mean, there was a moment for me where it was like an epiphany. I was a little emotional because I was like, I'm really buying dinner for my daughter to like make sure that she's okay, and I felt okay in that moment. I felt like things were going to be okay. And if I decided to keep going down this path, that I felt like it was a warranted to do so after, seeing these initial successes. And so just to see how far you've come in the fan base that you've grown, and to see that you're almost at 60% with love letters, and to know that, this is just the beginning, just like you said, like I'm understanding now through the development and partnerships that I've gained that we are extremely ahead of the curve to a certain extent. And so, to kind of hone in on that piece, I know that you mentioned teaching, one of the biggest parts for me over this time is realizing bridging that gap. A lot of it is providing digestible, consumable, educational content, for people to really understand the processes. You spoke to token gating, having these 1,000 fans, but being able to, instead of having 10,000 fans at $10 each, right? Let's have 1,000 fans at $100 each, and be able to intimately curate an experience for them that is once in a lifetime, that they'll never be able to get anywhere else. And no, you can't get that experience from listening to your favorite artist on Spotify, And so the question is, how do we bridge that gap and get ourselves out there even more, to liken it to where we can have it out there in front of 100,000 people, maybe 1 million people. And, I see where it's going now, to where people are going to start to source their music from maybe the Web3 space, and now we have to start accounting for streams on the blockchain as well. And these streams on the blockchain are going to be counting for certified plaques and everything like that equally. So just hone in on how your sentiment and us being as early as we are, man. It's such an honor to be in this position, but so much further to go. And what are your future outsets, and what are your hopes for the future within the space for your own career within the next 6 months to a year, 2 years, and on down the line?
Well, my goal is to just keep going, keep working as hard as I am, and I know over time that's just going to keep growing and growing. So right now I'm DJing hard, performing on spaces, and selling these letters. I think we've got about 300 odd to go, but we've sold 500 in a month, which is absolutely awesome. And
yep.
And in the meantime, I'm still staying active on Web 2 as well. I think that's the hardest thing really at the moment. Is it was hard enough just having a Web 2 career, right? Balancing creating music, all of that creative side, and then doing the admin, and then performing and all that, and then now it's like nurturing your community as well, which is really important to me. And I think that's really what gives an NFT value, is how you nurture your community after everything is sold out, and especially for people to invest what they have in me. I'm only going to give back to them for that. I think that's awesome, and I think that's where NFT projects go wrong, especially music NFTs so far. You see all these big bands like Muse, like the Wombats, who drop an NFT but then don't do anything with that afterwards, and then the floor price drops, right? And I think that's just nothing wrong with the bands at all, or these artists. I think it's just that they don't fully understand what NFTs are and what gives them value.
Right.
And I think, and that's the thing. Even after this collection sells out, my plan's just to grow with my collectors as far and wide as I possibly can. And I mean, I'm stubborn as fuck. I'm not giving up, and I'm in this till the very end. And so I don't think I'll even retire, because I love what I do, And so yeah, that's why I'm doing these VIP tickets to my shows. Like especially with some of the shows I've played so far, they've been such mind-blowing gigs, and I want to just bring all these people along with me for the ride as much as possible. And I think what's so awesome with these digital collectibles, which is basically what they are with Superfan Access, it's like a great way to keep track of your collectors, to stay connected, and it's like, actually, what's funny, Juice, I was actually having a phone call with one of my my fiercest collectors. He's absolutely awesome, and we were like just chatting on a phone call, like one-on-one. And what's amazing is that just he's inspired by my work already, but me having that phone call with him, I was like re-inspired from having that call with the collector, and we like. It just goes hand in hand, and I feel like we've never really had that connection with people, especially on a digital level before. That's right. Something I loved about these living room shows. It was like we were on the same level, right? And we could talk to each other like humans. Something I find a bit frustrating from playing these big stages sometimes is how people feel like I can't be accessed as much, and so like, especially as a solo artist, it can actually be quite lonely sometimes. And you like play a big show and you're twiddling your thumbs backstage, and then you go out in the crowd sometimes, but people are like too shy and too nervous to come up to you. And I think that's a bit of a shame, but really I'm still a human being, and so are all these artists.
Right.
So you can, I think that's what's really cool about this technology, is like, it's human at the end of the day. It is really incredibly hard to understand, but shout out to Gary V for being a huge factor of that. He was one of the people who was posting so much about NFTs, one of the first people to do so. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what an NFT was. And that's what gave me the urge to learn about it.
Right. Well, Josh, man, I do want to thank you for your time today. We've really hit on a few different areas. I feel like we can kind of keep going for a long time. But maybe we'll save that for another round, and or I'll hopefully be looking forward to seeing you Art Basel this year, right? Maybe.
Thinking about it. Thing is, it's still quite it's a bit of a trip for me, of course.
Okay.
And I'd love to go. I'm just like with accommodation prices as well.
Yeah, right.
It's a bit overkill. So I'm trying to find maybe like a couch I can crash on or something like that. So I can so it's worth so it's not too expensive. But I've heard such amazing things. A lot of people are trying to take me over to that as well. So it's on the cards. I'm just working on somewhere I can afford to stay, basically.
Aren't we all? But you know what, man? I think we're headed in the right direction, and one way or the other, I'm sure we'll make sure we link up in person as well, here in the States and or overseas. And man, Josh, thank you so much for your time today, bro. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be looking forward to staying up with you in the Twitter Spaces, and we'll get this interview out to the people.
That'd be awesome. Fantastic, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, that is our LR Backstage with Josh Savage. This is Juice with the Listening Room, and we'll see you guys next time.